She shook her head, but that wasn't what was bothering her about Jeff. She squinted at the grainy image, and as she did so it slowly dawned on her what was amiss. Oh, she suddenly felt sick. That gnawing feeling something was wrong crystallized into horrifying realization. Oh, Jeff. Anya? She shook her head. Anya, what is it? It was freezing outside, and even thought the equipment was less than state-of-the-art. The picture was all too clear enough. Jeff's not breathing. What? Lewis leaned closer still to the monitor. There's no breath coming out of his mouth. If he's talking and breathing. Her voice finally failed her. We'd be able to see his breath in the air, Lewis said grimly, finishing her sentence for her. They both stared intently at the screen, each of them willing a small cloud of breath to plume out of Jeff's mouth and into the early morning air, but nothing came. The distortion that had been hovering by the gate came slowly down the path and stopped next to Jeff. Now that it was closer, Peroni could just about make out a shifting human form in its mist. It's him, she said almost reverentially. I'm guessing the CCTV can't pick him up properly, but that's him all right. The collector, Lewis said grimly. Larry cried out in shock as someone began hammering on the front door. Jesus. A second later Peroni appeared in the doorway looking grim. Jeff's dead, she said numbly. Then who the fuck is that hammering on the fucking door? Larry asked with growing panic. Jeff, she replied. And Randall's with him. Although he knew that was coming, fear punched Father Nichols in the stomach and he wasn't sure, but the way Peroni looked at him he might have gasped out loud. He barely heard Larry as he spoke again over the roar of the blood in his ears, no loss though, as it was probably just another profanity. Then he realized they were both looking at him now. Had he spoken, offered some practicality to help get them out of this? The answer was no, of course, because he had nothing to offer. After all, when a dead man comes knocking at your door, what can you say? Except perhaps a prayer. In the hallway behind Peroni, Lewis appeared, pistol gripped tightly in both hands. He pointed it off towards the front door. His face was set like stone. His eyes had narrowed to predatory slits. Father? Peroni was at Nichols' side before he realized it, and when he didn't answer she took him by the shoulders and shook him hard. He was surprised at her strength, but one look into her eyes told him it was born of fear. She was terrified but trying desperately to fight it. And it was that struggle more than anything that dragged him out of his stupor. Upstairs, he said. We'll have to trust the door will hold, for now. She nodded, relief flooding her features. Agreed, she said, then shouted over her shoulder, Lewis, we're moving upstairs, cover us then get yourself up there too. Not much of a place for a fucking last stand, Lewis said, eyes still locked on the door as the hammering continued. It'll have to do for now, Nichols said, moving forwards and taking Larry by the arm. Come on Larry, he added firmly. As he passed Peroni in the doorway she gave him a thin but genuine smile. Good to have you back, Father. He answered her with a nod and pulled Larry through the door. His adrenaline pumping at last, he felt like a man with a purpose. Things were clearer now. He was scared, yes, and things looked bad for them all, but he swore to himself then and there that he would die before he would be so useless to Lewis and Peroni again, and yes, even Larry McCulloch. He pulled Larry past Lewis, who raised his pistol so as not to aim at them, then returned it to the door after they passed. Nichols paused for a moment at the foot of the stairs and glanced at the door. Jeff was just a few feet from him but may have been a million miles away. Sorry, Jeff, he said under his breath, then half led, half dragged Larry with him upstairs. As Jeff hammered on. Everyone into Larry's room, it's the biggest and we can see the front door from the landing there, Peroni instructed, close behind Larry and Nichols now. The three of them sprinted up the stairs, taking them two at a time. Then when they reached the top, Peroni ushered Nichols and Larry into his room, then spun around on the landing to aim her pistol down the stairs and at the front door at the bottom. Lewis, up, she shouted. Not needing a second invitation, Lewis bounded up the stairs and joined her on the landing, where they both stood side by side aiming. When nothing came bursting through the door, Peroni turned to Lewis. Stay here, she told him, you can see the door just fine. And if anything comes through it, shoot first. Yeah, I got it. Good man. She patted him on the shoulder and moved to go through into Larry's bedroom but stopped for a moment. Say, Lewis? Huh? He said without turning around. What's with the swearing all of a sudden? His grim face relaxed for a second and he shrugged. Didn't realize I had been. Fuck yeah, she replied impishly, and after just catching the utter shock on Lewis' face, went through into Larry's room where the old crook was in full ranting mode. This is fucking insane. What the hell are we going to do now? We remain calm, Peroni told him as she holstered her pistol. We need to think. Calm? Bollocks. Someone has led that bastard here, someone has grasped. He held his head in his hands, all thought of outward appearance gone. He was scared shitless and he didn't give a damn who saw it. "Larry, please," Father Nichols said and went over to the window. He pulled the curtain aside and looked down into the street below, half expecting to see hell itself outside, but it was just the same sleepy urban scene that had always been there, seemingly oblivious to the drama playing out right at its heart. He scanned the street from end to end. There was no sign of Jeff or Randall. They were probably both by the front door, which was obscured by the side of the house from this vantage point. Bang, bang, bang on the door. It seemed impossibly loud from up here, and it was fraying Larry's nerves one by one with each blow. "Christ. Can't somebody do something about that fucking noise?" he pleaded. "You can go down there and answer it if you like," Lewis called through from the landing. "Shut up," Larry screamed back. "You people are supposed to be protecting me. You're supposed to be keeping me safe." His voice was edging towards the hysterical now. "Larry," Peroni snapped, "Jeff was dead and McCulloch's bleeding was cutting right through her, so much so she couldn't stop herself saying through gritted teeth, 'It's you he wants. Maybe we should let him have you?'" She instantly regretted the remark, but mostly because it felt damn good to say it. She saw Nichols out of the corner of her eye, turning to her no doubt in shock, but didn't meet his gaze. Here, Lewis added from his post out on the landing. "Fucking try it," Larry retorted. "Enough," Nichols said, keeping his tone as soft as he could. Bang, bang, bang. On the door downstairs, as loud as gunshots echoing throughout the house. That alone was enough to send them all insane given time, let alone the threat of violence it promised, Nichols thought. Or perhaps even drive Anya and Lewis to throw Larry out of the window. He looked at the Italian. No, she wouldn't. There might come a time when all of them would wanted to, but she would be first in line to stop anyone. Lewis too wouldn't, although he would never admit it. He was as committed as they all were to saving McCulloch, the ingrate that he was. So where was the collector? Nichols knew he was out there, lurking somewhere in the darkness conducting this little nightmare. Also, he wasn't sure if it was his imagination, but the priest thought he caught the faint feel and smell of static in the air. Things could get very bad, very quickly. That phrase was rattling around in his head again. Then the hammering stopped, leaving the room pin drop quiet apart from their fearful breathing. They all exchanged a glance. What next? A loud burst of static from Peroni's radio broke the silence and the Italian cried out in shock. She fumbled with the radio, almost dropping it as if it had just tried to jump right out of her hand. "Hello?" A weak voice said through the radio. "Hello. This is Jeff. Come in, over." The voice was labored, the each syllable slurred, but it was Jeff. "Oh, no." Peroni closed her eyes and gritted her teeth. "Hello?" The voice came again. "Bastard," Lewis cursed from the landing. "Not this," Peroni silently pleaded, "anything but this. This is Jeff, over. Please come in." "Lewis? Anya? Please come in, over." "Oh, Jeff," Peroni fought back tears. She looked at her radio. "Don't, Anya," Nichols warned. She looked at him and he flinched at the pain in her eyes. So much pain everywhere. He shook his head and she nodded back. "But it's Jeff," Lewis called through. "You can hear it's him. He sounds." But could not finish. "That goes for you too, Lewis," Nichols said, remembering he also had a radio. "But what if that bastard has got a gun to Jeff's head?" Lewis asked desperately. "Jeff's gone," Nichols said it as plainly as he could, but it wasn't easy dismissing someone's life like that. The words stung him with guilt. "That's not Jeff, or at least not the Jeff we knew." "Oh, fucking hell," Larry exclaimed. "Have a word with yourself, Father. You can hear it's him, plain as day." They all jumped as one as the hammering started again. "Please." Jeff's tinny voice pleaded through the radio. "Please guys, let me in. For pity's sake." "Lewis? Lewis, I know you're there, let me in, mate, please." Lewis let out a sob and through the door Peroni saw him take a step towards the top of the stairs, his face a mask of indecision. "Lewis." He turned to her with tears in his eyes and she shook her head. "He was just a kid," Lewis said, but came away from the stairs nevertheless. He cleared his throat and wiped his eyes, then re-aimed back down, his hands remarkably steady. "I'm so sorry," Nichols said, although he wasn't sure who to. "Please." The radio speaker distorted, making Nichols wince at the harshness of it as Jeff begged. "Please. Lewis, Anya. Anyone, Father Nichols?" The priest drawn in a sharp intake of breath, hearing his name spoken by a dead man. "For pity's sake, let me in. Please, anyone, just talk to me. Oh, guys, I'm so scared. He said he's going to hurt me again." Do you hear? He was sobbing now. Peroni screwed her eyes tight shut. Please. Stop, she whispered. You don't know what he's done to me. Even through the small radio speaker the accusation was clear in his strained voice. It's horrible. He only wants McCulloch. He says we can all go free if we just give him McCulloch. The old crook instinctively glanced at the others in the room, looking for any sign they might relent to this. Christ knew he would in a hummingbird's heartbeat if the roles were reversed. A quick mental calculation showed he was clearly screwed if any of them did. Nichols wouldn't, but that still left 2 guns and nothing but a priest to protect him. Peroni was distracted, so if he was going to take matters into his own hands, now might be the time, but he would have to be damn fast on his feet to disarm the Italian before Lewis waded in. And he hadn't been fast on his feet for over 15 years. I know it's hard, but Jeff is already dead, Nichols said, breaking the silence. Normally, Larry would have made some quip at this ludicrous remark, but as the priest had said himself, things were about as far from normal as they could get. No, this time Larry was counting on them all swallowing this voodoo bullshit. It just might be the only thing keeping him alive. But the dead man at the door hadn't finished just yet. Why am I always the one left out in the cold? Why do you always leave me on my own? Jeff asked, still hammering on the door. This is all your fault. He screamed. All of you. Turn the fucking radio off, Larry demanded. Why don't you all come down here and see what he's done to me? Jeff shouted. Open the fucking door. Then I'll show you what you've done. Let me in. For Christ's sake, Larry was pleading now. Turn it off. Peroni turned her radio off and threw it onto the bed. She let out a sob, but bit back before more came. God damn him, Lewis shouted from the landing. Why doesn't he just get on with it and come through that fucking door? Lewis, please. Nichols moved over to the bedroom door where he could see the man aiming down the stairs and to the door beyond. He was rocking nervously from his front foot to the back, his jaw clenching and unclenching. Lewis. Hey! Lewis screamed downstairs, ignoring Nichols. If you are so tough, why don't you let Jeff go and come in here yourself and see what I've got for you? Lewis, Peroni said sharply. She was at Nichols' shoulder now. Calm down. But Lewis was growing more agitated by the second, and for one horrible moment Nichols thought he might actually go storming down the stairs, all guns blazing. Father Nichols? Lewis finally said, only fractionally calmer for Peroni's order. That creature you told us about, the one the other collector created in your church? Why doesn't the bastard send one of those things in here now? If it was half as strong as you said, it could make kindling out of that door. Unless it was all bullshit, Larry thought, but didn't say it out loud like he would have normally done, remembering his precarious situation. Then to his shock Lewis said it for him. If it is as real as you said. Lewis, enough, Peroni snapped. No, Anya, it's all right, Nichols said quietly. It was real enough, Lewis. Nichols' hand went instinctively to the scars on his chest. So you say, Lewis replied, not looking around. Peroni pushed past Nichols to join Lewis on the landing. She placed her free hand on his shoulder and he flinched at her touch. Anya, Lewis said, his voice faltering with emotion. You really sure about all this? Yes, she answered. And so are you. Jeff. I can't believe he's.